how much the graphics settings that you have on your games actually affect the performance that you're getting in terms of frame rate, and which settings can you turn down with actually suffering a big quality drop to get a bit more performance out of your system and be able to play at higher FPS. That's what we're going to be checking here today at PC Guy. We're going to be doing a bit of a dive. I'll pick one game, Metro Exodus. I picked this one because it's a bit of a more demanding game, so it's a bit easier to see how other call weaker cards like my own. I have a 6060 Ti, so it's not really high-end stuff, but it can run the game at pretty playable FPS. But we're gonna see how much better we can make it, and how much of a hit each specific setting on the settings panel will actually influence it. So these are baseline settings that we'll be using. I'll try to move the camera as little as possible to keep the image steady, and so it will not be a variable in our actual testing. So we're seeing around the, I'll reset it, but we're seeing around the 70 FPS with a 59 FPS low. This is running at 1080p, mind you. Now let's go into the settings and let's go change some stuff and see how it actually affects it. I'm running the game at 1080p on ultra quality, motion blur is on normal, DX11, RTX off, and hairworks also off, because, well, I'll actually let you guys see how much it actually affects it later. Texture filtering, AF16X, and, well, that's basically all the settings. Now the first thing that most people will do right off the bat if they're experiencing low FPS or want to increase their FPS is to turn their graphic settings down via usually games have a general settings bundle, let's call it, which is here quality ultra. So let's start turning it down from ultra just to high and see what happens. Turning the settings to medium is giving us, like you see, around the 80 plus FPS, around the 85 mark, which is, well, 15 higher than the 70 that we were seeing previously on ultra settings. If you look at the image, just at the static well, background here, you don't really see much of a difference in quality. I'll put the shots side by side when I edit the video, and even if you do see a little bit of change in some details, you won't really notice it when you're running around playing and shooting and waving the camera around. So is it worth it for the extra FPS? Probably is if your graphics card cannot handle any higher than that. Let's see how much difference it makes when you actually put it on the lowest quality setting. Going all the way to the low preset, the FPS jumps up all the way to 120. Now it's starting to get a little bit more noticeable, the drop in image quality, especially when you move the camera around a little bit, although that might be the game itself. So yeah, you do get quite a bit of an FPS jump turning down to the lowest, but then you also will start getting worse actual image quality. However, if your graphics card is really struggling to play the game, you basically just almost doubled the FPS by turning the settings down just on the general filter. But let's look at the filters in high detail now. I'll put the settings on ultra again and I'll see how much difference each individual option makes in your FPS and how you can, well, best pick and choose which individual options to turn up or down and how it will affect your gameplay from there. We're back on ultra settings right now and we're seeing 83 FPS. It's a bit higher than the 70 something that we saw as our baseline, but let's use the 84 for baseline when comparing the performance of other features right now. So let's head into the options. It's probably because I have moved the camera slightly and it's rendering a different scene than before. And let's turn the texture filtering to 4 times instead of 16 times and see what effect it has. As far as quality goes, I don't see a major performance hit on in terms of quality, but as far as the actual frame rate goes, I also don't really see an improvement, so safe to say that you can keep this one turned up. I'm turning it back up to 16 to keep the baseline a bit stable and to keep it as a variable that you can actually control, and I'm going to turn down the shading rate to 0.5x as opposed to 1x it has. Here you can actually see an improvement in terms of frame rate. It's up to 105 as opposed to the 83, 84 that we were seeing previously. However, it is a bit noticeable that the image quality is slightly worse. So, it's up to you how much you value performance as opposed to quality and what your graphics card can actually do at playable frame rates. Going the other way with the shading rate, I put it at 1.5 and let's see the effect. Having it at 1.5 does not seem to decrease your frame rate, so either it's not in effect because it is not supported or it just does not have much of a performance hit, but in any case it does not seem to hurt. It also does not seem to make it spectacularly better in any way, so I would honestly just leave it in this case at the one that is the standard default, unless you want the extra performance from lowering it to a lower value. During the installation of has given us a performance increase of about 10 FPS, so a decent amount really. And while the quality of the picture itself does not seem to be a whole lot worse either. A lot of these settings don't seem to make the picture worse individually. However, if you turned all of them down, then the combined effect of all of them down would probably look quite a bit different. This is because if the image quality decreases by just a slight amount, it's barely perceptible. But if all the settings are off, then those slight amounts that each of them contributes will compound with each other and will give you just a generally worse picture quality than you were used to with the settings all on and high. Now comes the heavy hitter. Let's try turning on ray tracing and see how much a performance hit it actually gives. I've tested this in the past, but I'll just do a quick rundown here. Now turning on ray tracing, you can see the performance hit quite high. You can see that you are at 41, 42 FPS right now as opposed to 80 plus that you were having beforehand. This is a well lit area, so there's more rays of light coming through. The picture quality, I'll put it side by side, so it's also difficult for me to say as I'm recording, but I'll put it side by side. However, the game is not looking so much better that I think you are really justified in taking 50% of a performance hit to have ray tracing on. Keep in mind the 1660 Ti has no RT cores, so there is no hardware accelerated ray tracing, and you might see better results if you have a graphics card from the RTX lineup that actually has dedicated hardware for it. In any case, the performance hit right now, I do not think is worth it. Maybe in a couple generations the performance hit will be less and the quality will be better. You might see a bit of a difference looking at the reflections, for example, on your gun and things like that. However, as it is right now, I will just play with it turned off. Well, these were most of the settings that you can actually change in Metro Exodus. A lot of other games have a bit more in-depth settings that you can explore. So I'll just give you a quick rundown now of my own experience, what are the worst offenders when it comes to performance hits that do not actually contribute a whole lot. You have the shadows. Shadows usually are difficult for your GPU to render, so setting them to a bit of a lower setting will give you quite a performance boost with not losing much in terms of the actual game experience. So shadows are one of the first things you need to look at. Other things are reflections, like water reflections. If there's water in your games and the reflections are there, it will also take quite a bit for your GPU to render. So that is also a point that if you want to get a few extra FPS, try turning on the reflections if you can. Another and also quite a big hitter is anti-aliasing and other post-processing effects like that. If you have anti-aliasing on, you'll have a bit of a smoother image. Think of the image as being composed of square pixels, and the anti-aliasing is in place. It's a sort of post-processing for the frames that your GPU renders. It's in place to actually make it look more round so that the edges of the pixels don't look so sharp and squarey. So it can be quite a big improvement in some titles for having anti-aliasing on, and your picture will look better. However, it also takes a lot of GPU resources to actually do those effects on improving your image. Sadly, these three categories are not really visible in Metro Exodus, so I could not adjust them, but in other games they might be, so that's something definitely worth looking at. Another option that was present in Metro Exodus, but I have not tried, was NVIDIA's Hairworks. Hairworks is notorious for being a performance hog. It will slow down your game like crazy, all for the sake of rendering the character's hair a little bit better. Now, while it is in Metro, I did not test it because I was not in an area where a lot of characters are with their hair exposed. The save points that I had either had no other NPC characters there with hair to render, or those characters were wearing things like hats and such, so there was not a lot of hair for Hairworks to render. However, this is particularly visible in, for example, Witcher 3 and games of that sort, where there are a lot of characters running around with a lot of hair on their heads. So yeah, this concludes our testing for today. I might do another video more in depth in the future with more titles, more settings, so to give you guys a better idea of what you can turn down to get a better performance on your game. I hope this helps you guys that are struggling with either a lower end GPU that is struggling with some AAA games that are a bit more demanding, like Metro Exodus, Witcher, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, games like that. They take a very heavy toll on your power, on your computer's processing power. Or for people that have higher refresh rate monitors and are struggling to hit those higher refresh rates on some places, this might actually help you reach a bit of a faster refresh rate and better FPS on your games. This has been Ethic PC Guy. Leave a comment or a like on the channel if you enjoyed this content. Consider subscribing to help the channel grow in the future and get us the possibility to do better content, more content, and a better variety of videos for you guys to enjoy. Hope I'll see you in the future, hopefully in the next video. In the meantime, have fun, and I'll see you later.